most gracious, most merciful. All praise is due to God, Lord of the universe, and may God's peace and blessings be upon all of His prophets and messengers, including His final and beloved messenger, Muhammad, and His purified household and righteous companions. Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The 3rd and 4th Islamic centuries, or the 9th and 10th centuries of the Common Era, represent perhaps the most critical period in the early development of Imami Shi'i thought. With the demise of the 11th Imam Al-Hasan ibn Ali al-Askari in the year 260 after Hijrah, or 874 of the Common Era, and the commencement of the minor occultation Al-Ghayb al-Sughra of the 12th Imam Al-Mahdi, the Imami community largely transitioned from one that was entirely dependent on the existence of and direct access to the Imams to one that was subsequently largely dependent on the intelligentsia and the religious scholars for authority in guidance in its religious, political, and spiritual affairs. For during the preceding 3 centuries, the Imami community referred to the Imams for every concern. Now that the Imams were no longer directly or indirectly accessible to the masses with the commencement of the major occultation, Al-Ghayb al-Kubra, of the Imam in the year 329 after Hijrah, or 941 of the Common Era, the community had to fill a major void. It was under these circumstances that the Imami leadership and scholars of this period embarked on 2 major intellectual missions that would shape the trajectory of Imami thought until the modern era. The first was the compilation of large books of hadith reports, culminating in the adoption of the 4 books, or Al-Kutub al-Arba'a. These 4 books are, number 1, Kitab al-Kafi, composed by al-Shaykh al-Kulayni; number 2, Man la yahdurhu al-Faqih, composed by al-Shaykh al-Saduq; number 3, Al-Tahdhib; and number 4, Al-Istibsar, both composed by al-Shaykh al-Tusi. The second intellectual mission was the gradual endorsement and application of the concept of ijtihad in legal theory and jurisprudence. And while pockets of Imami communities were scattered across the Islamic regions, this intellectual output mostly stemmed from 2 major cities, Qom in Iran and Baghdad in Iraq. We have already seen some efforts from both of these regions pertaining to the intellectual and political advancement of the community through the efforts of the Nawbakhtis as well as al-Shaykh al-Kulayni. In order to further understand the nature of this critical point in the development of Imami thought generally and its jurisprudence specifically, this episode of the Makers of the Shi'i World will focus on the figure of Abu Ali, Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn al Junayd al-Iskafi, known simply as Ibn al Junayd, and the reception of his ideas among his immediate successors and later generations of Imami jurists. Several sources state that Ibn al Junayd, along with Abu Muhammad al-Hasan ibn Ali al-Umani, known as Ibn Abi Aqil, who died before the year 369 after Hijrah, or 979 of the Common Era, these 2 were the first 2 Imami scholars to introduce ijtihad and systematic law to the Imami community. As such, these 2 scholars are referred to in major works as the 2 ancient scholars, Al-Qadimain. Ibn al Junayd presents a very interesting example of an important Imami figure in the development of jurisprudence because he is alleged to have held non-mainstream views, as we will see shortly. Despite this, however, Ibn al Junayd continued to be held in high regard and is considered a preeminent Imami jurist. The 4th Islamic century, or the 10th century CE, has been dubbed the Shi'i century. This is because during this time, as the central Abbasid government's power was weakening, Shi'ism as a whole experienced great resurgence and vitality Shi'ism as a whole experienced great resurgence and vitality in various parts of the Muslim world. To the west, in North Africa especially, the Ismaili Fatimids were completely in control, eventually announcing a rival caliphate and establishing Cairo as their capital. To the east, especially in Iraq and Iran, the Buwayhids managed to gain control over several important cities, including Baghdad, which was the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate. Whether the Buwayhids were Imami or Zaydi Shi'is is not entirely clear. But what we do know is that they were very sympathetic to the Shi'is, and Imami Shi'ism, especially in places such as Baghdad, was largely able to flourish during their 100-year reign. Despite their retaining the Abbasid caliphs, under Buwayhid rule, Imami scholars enjoyed an unprecedented degree of freedom, especially to write and express their views without fear of persecution. It is in this context that our jurist, Al-Shaykh Ibn al Junayd, lived and worked. Ibn al Junayd was born in Al-Iskaf in the outskirts of Nahrawan, east of Baghdad. While the exact year of his birth is unknown, some scholars have suggested that he was born around the year 290 after Hijrah, or 903 of the Common Era. Unfortunately, virtually no information is available on the details of his life, except that he grew up, studied, and taught in Baghdad. He also appears to have traveled to Nishapur in or after 340 after Hijrah, or 951 or 2 CE, and met there with the leading Hanafi jurist, Abu al-Abbas al-Fadl ibn al-Abbas al-Saghani, before returning to Baghdad. He died in the year 381 after Hijrah, or 990 or 91, and was buried in Ray, south of Tehran, or according to other accounts, he died and was buried in Baghdad. Several major Imami biographers and jurists have praised Ibn al Junayd. For example, Ibn al-Nadim al-Baghdadi states that Ibn al Junayd was among the greatest of the Imami Shi'is of his time. Al-Shaykh Ahmad ibn Ali al-Najashi states that he was a prominent and trustworthy member of the Imami leadership. Ibn al Junayd was a contemporary of the Buwayhid ruler Abu al-Hussein Ahmad ibn Buwayh, known as Mu'izz al-Dawla, who died in the year 356 after Hijrah, or 967 CE. And he was held in high regard by him. Ibn al Junayd was also the contemporary of the Imami traditionist in Qum, al-Shaykh al-Saduq. In fact, some reports suggest that they both died in the same exact year. Additionally, he was one of Muhammad ibn al-Nu'man, al-Shaykh al-Mufid's most prominent teachers. Ibn al Junayd was known to be a prolific author whose dozens of books spanned various disciplines, including dialectical theology, jurisprudence, legal theory, literature, and others. The following titles account for some of Ibn al Junayd's most relevant works. The first is Tahdhib al-Shi'a li-Ahkam al-Sharia, the edification of the Shia in the rulings of the Sharia. This work was perhaps Ibn al Junayd's largest and most comprehensive on jurisprudence, consisting of approximately 20 volumes and encompassing over 130 chapters of jurisprudence. According to Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaykh al-Tusi, Ibn al Junayd arranged its contents according to the way of the jurists. This description seems to suggest that this work contained inferential evidence or istidlali evidence for his legal views, as opposed to earlier Imami works that must have been traditional or riwa'i in their structures. The second is Al-Mukhtasar Al-Ahmadi Lil-Fiqh Al-Muhammadi, or the Ahmadi Preface to Muhammadi Jurisprudence. This work was an abridgment to the larger Tahdhib al-Shia, which later jurists appear to have access to. It is frequently praised and cited in the books of the later jurists of the city of Al-Hilla. The third is Kashf al-Tamwih wal-Ilbas ala Aghmar al-Shi'a fi Amr al-Qiyas, or the removal of obscurity and deception for naive Shi'is concerning analogical reasoning. As its title suggests, this work seems to have been concerned with legal theory and was dedicated to the discussion of qiyas, or analogical reasoning. In particular, it was directed toward his fellow Imamis who have largely repudiated the validity of qiyas as a legal tool. The fourth is إظهار ما ستره أهل العناد من الرواية عن أئمة العترة في أمر الاجتهاد, or disclosing the traditions from the Imams concerning ijtihad and that the stubborn group has suppressed. This work seems to have also been a legal theory text and perhaps a refutation of some of the traditionists and others among the Imamis who rejected the permissibility of engaging in ijtihad in legal theory and jurisprudence. The next work is called Jawabat Mu'izz al-Dawla, or the Answers to Mu'izz al-Dawla. This work was a compilation of correspondence between the Buwayhid ruler Mu'izz al-Dawla and Ibn al Junayd, or answers to the queries of the former by the latter. Its attribution to Ibn al Junayd shows that he was highly respected and sought after by Mu'izz al-Dawla. Finally, the next work is نقد ما نقده الزجاجي النيشابوري على أبي محمد الفضل ibn Shadhan, or a refutation of al-Zujaji al-Nishaburi's refutation of Abu Muhammad al-Fadl ibn Shadhan. This work was a defense of al-Fadl ibn Shadhan al-Nisaburi, who died in the year 260 after Hijrah, or 874 CE, an Imami supporter of reasoning in law and theology. Unfortunately, none of his large number of mentioned works are extant. All are either lost or may have been destroyed. However, an extensive number of his legal opinions have been mentioned in Imami books of jurisprudence. Perhaps the most comprehensive of such works is Al-Hasan ibn Yusuf al-Mutahhar al-Allam al-Hilli's Mukhtalaf al-Shi'a, which includes hundreds of Ibn al Junayd's legal opinions. More recently, Ali Panah al-Ishtihardi has produced a compilation of all of Ibn al Junayd's legal opinions, which have been extracted from Al-Allam al-Hilli's work under the title Majmu' Fatawa Ibn al Junayd. Virtually all scholars and historians who have mentioned or written about Ibn al Junayd have asserted that his works and views were rejected or abandoned by his successors because of his alleged acceptance and use of analogical reasoning, or qiyas. Among Ibn al Junayd's earliest biographers, Al-Shaykh al-Najashi states that some of his own trustworthy teachers related that Ibn al Junayd accepted the validity of qiyas. After mentioning some of Ibn al Junayd's works, Al-Shaykh al-Tusi states that he accepted the validity of qiyas and that because of this, his works were rejected or abandoned. A quick overview of the statements of Ibn al Junayd's students and successors reveals that they were often severely critical of him for allegedly holding non-mainstream views. For example, Ibn al Junayd's most prominent student, Al-Shaykh al-Mufid, held that his teacher had committed at least two grave mistakes. The first was his use of analogy, or al-qiyas, in legal theory and jurisprudence, as well as his dependence on presumption, or al-dhan, through his use of singular hadith reports, those known as akhbar ahad, which were non-mutawatir, for example. The second mistake was Ibn al Junayd's attribution of apparent contradictions in the meanings of differing traditions of the Imams to their personal opinions, al-ra'i, implying possibly that they were not inerrant, ma'soom. Al-Mufid's successor, Ali ibn al-Husayn al-Sharif al-Murtada, criticized Ibn al Junayd not only for his alleged reliance on his personal opinions, but also that Ibn al Junayd's legal rulings often conflicted with an established scholarly consensus. Finally, despite Al-Shaykh al-Tusi's mentioning of Ibn al Junayd and in his chains of narration, he apparently does not mention any of Ibn al Junayd's legal rulings in any of his works, practically confirming his rejection of Ibn al Junayd's views. It was not until 2 centuries after Ibn al Junayd, beginning with Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Mansur, known as Ibn Idris al-Hilli, that Ibn al Junayd began to receive formal recognition, praise and reverence for his works and views. In his famous work As-Sara'ir, Ibn Idris highly praises Ibn al Junayd as one of the foremost and magnificent jurists among the Imamis, and repeatedly mentions his legal rulings along with his evidence found in Ibn al Junayd's work Mukhtasar al-Ahmadi, which we alluded to earlier, and Ibn Idris seems to have had access to. Following Ibn Idris, Ja'far ibn al-Hasan, known as al-Muhaqqiq al-Hilli, made great use of Ibn al Junayd's legal opinions. In his Al-Mu'tabar, al-Muhaqqiq states that while a large number of eminent jurists preceded him, he chose to relate the opinions of only those whom he considered the cream of the crop, listing Ibn al Junayd among the top 7. A study of Ibn al Junayd's opinions in this work shows that on some points his opinions were in agreement with the majority Imami view, while on others they were opposed. However, Ibn al Junayd's greatest praise and recognition came from al-Muhaqqiq's student and nephew, the preeminent scholar Al-Hasan ibn Yusuf al-Mutahhar, known as Al-Allama al-Hilli. As I've mentioned already, Al-Allama's multi-volume legal work, Mukhtalaf al-Shi'a, which is dedicated to presenting the conflicting legal views of Imami scholars, contains hundreds of Ibn al Junayd's opinions. After this general overview, in the short amount of time that we have left for this episode, it is instructive to attempt a brief answer to the following question. How can we explain the interesting case in which Ibn al Junayd's views and works were initially criticized and dismissed, but he himself continued to be highly regarded as a preeminent Imami jurist, in addition to later regard for his views by subsequent generations of jurists? A few brief points can be made in answering this question. The first point is that the juristic terms al-qiyas, al-ra'i, al-ijtihad, al-ijma' and similar concepts may have changed in their meanings and connotations over time. This is clearly the case with the term ijtihad, for example, which earlier was equated with personal opinion and then later taken to mean the activity of exerting reasoned effort to deduce a legal ruling. Alternatively, it may be argued that various scholars understood certain terms to mean different things. In other words, what jurist A understands term X to mean may be different than what jurist B understands the same term to mean. This is all to say that what the terms al-qiyas or ijtihad al-ra'i meant during the time of the Imams, for example, may have meant or taken to mean something different during the time of Ibn al Junayd and or his successors of jurists. A contemporary example of this idea may be seen in legal discussions on concepts such as tanqih al-manat, or the attempt to understand the reason or rationale behind a ruling, and others, as well as the differentiation between different levels of al-qiyas in legal theory. The second point is that some legal and or theological doctrines and concepts may have developed over a certain period of time and thus may not necessarily have been as clear-cut to all Imami scholars as assumed to be at other points in time. For example, scholars note that in addition to Ibn al Junayd, earlier notable Imamis such as Yunus ibn Abd al-Rahman, a prominent companion of the 8th Imam, Ali al-Rida, and Al-Fadl ibn Shadan, a prominent companion of the 10th Imam, Ali al-Hadi, and others may have accepted the validity of qiyas. This reveals the possibility that the validity or non-validity of some concepts was not always unanimously agreed upon by jurists. The third and final point is that the use of certain legal tools or methodologies may sometimes be employed for the purposes of debating or instructing one's opponents. In other words, it may have been that Ibn al Junayd employed al-qiyas in order to debate or dialogue with those opposing jurists or legal schools that accepted the validity of al-qiyas. This seems especially relevant given the diversity of theological and legal schools of thought in Baghdad at the time. This overview and discussion of the life and legacy of the preeminent Imami jurist Ibn al Junayd reveals to us some of the interesting ways in which Imami thought, especially its legal theory and jurisprudence, developed in the early period of Imami Shi'ism. More importantly, it shows us how scholars attempted to navigate the challenges of diversity of opinion and maintain courteous relations and respect for their shared interests in scholarship and service to the community. Please join us once again next time for more on the makers of the Shi'i world. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا مولى الموحدين أسد الله الغالي، غالب كل غالب، مظهر العجائب. يا علي بن أبي طالب